In this video, I'm going to show you how to complete and timely file an S-Corp election form, also known as Form 2553. This is a document you complete if you have an LLC or a corporation and you want to have it taxed as an S-Corporation. I'm going to walk you through the form step by step and hopefully answer all of your questions, so by the time you're finished watching, you should have the confidence to file this document on your own. As a preview of what you can expect to see or learn, I'm going to show you where to find the instructions for this form, where to find the form itself, obviously how to complete the form, and while doing this, what things people often miss or where they might make mistakes when completing the form. I'll show you that too. How to complete the form if you live in a community property state. This is very important. A lot of enrolled agents, CPAs, tax attorneys even miss this. I myself have missed this earlier in my career. Where and how to send the form 2553, how long it takes to be processed, and what you can expect or how long it takes to receive the S-Corp acceptance letter, and what to do if you don't receive the S-Corp acceptance letter and you're kind of wondering, hey, what's the status of my S-Corp election? So if you want to learn any of those things, you're in the right place, and please do continue watching. If you want to learn how to file a late S-Corp election, you're in the wrong place. But I did create a video on that topic, so you can find that video on YouTube and watch it. That said, you may still want to watch this one because there are some things in here that I don't touch on in the late S-Corp election video. All right, so before we get started, if it's your first time watching, my name is Navi Miraj. I'm a CPA that teaches entrepreneurs how to save thousands of dollars in taxes. I do that here on social media, but I also teach it in a even more comprehensive and easy to understand way because I have more time with you through a course I developed. You can find those details on my website, which is navimirajcpa.com. But for now, if you get value out of this video, if you learn something, if you're using it to, complete your Form 2553 and make your S-Corp election, please consider subscribing to the channel, or perhaps a fellow entrepreneur who needs help with this. Please do share the video with them. It definitely helps the channel. Before I go on any further, let me just say, I think it's wise to seek out a professional to determine whether your entity should even be taxed as an S corporation. I do have a video that discusses 4 reasons you should not have your entity taxed as an S corporation, and I've actually added a 5th reason why you shouldn't. So, at a bare minimum, watch that video if you aren't going to get, professional advice that's individualized to your specific situation. At least once a month, I come across someone or I get an email who says, hey, I made an S corporation election, and I think after watching your videos, I may have made a mistake. Can you help me? How do I revoke the election? What's the process for that? Don't be that person. At a bare minimum, go watch that video on why you should probably not be an S corporation, right? Again, there's 4 or 5 reasons listed in that video, and don't make that election prematurely because it's kind of difficult to reverse. All right. What I'm going to do here in just a moment, I'll share my screen and show you this stuff. I'm going to use an example of an LLC electing to be taxed as an S corporation. So it'll be called sample LLC. But, this form 2553, is also for corporations who want to elect to be taxed as an S corporation. So don't think that just because, I'm showing an example of an LLC that corporations can't use that either. Both LLC and corporations can use this form to have the entity taxed as an S corp, okay? So let's start out by where to find Form 2553 and the instructions where that's located as well, okay? Let me transition to my computer and I'll show you that here in just a second. Okay, so here we are on my computer. You can see here, I just did a Google search for Form 2553. These are the options that sort of come up, or the results that come up. And you can just click on this first one about Form 2553. And if you do so, you'll get to this screen here, okay? And you can see there's a link to the actual form as well as a link to the instructions. And if you click on those, of course, you're gonna get the instructions themselves. This is what they look like, and the form itself as well, all right? So what I'm gonna do for you now is kind of walk you through an example of a form that I've kind of completed already, and we're gonna walk through it together, okay? So here is that form. And so in order for your S-Corp election to be considered filed timely, it needs to be submitted to the IRS within 2 months and 15 days of either the beginning of a new year, or if it's a new business entity, and let's say you form the entity on February 15th, for example, then it's 2 months and 15 days from February 15th, the date you formed the entity, okay? Those would be the scenarios where you follow the normal instructions on how to complete Form 2553 and what I'll be discussing in this video. So what I mean is, like, if you've passed 2 months and 15 days, then you need to follow sort of the late S Corp election rules. And again, I have a separate video on that topic that you can find on social media or on YouTube if that's what you're watching this video on. So let me just say that again in case you didn't catch it. In the first example, I'm saying you did one of two things. You either formed your entity with the state on January 1st. That's not super common, but let's say you were planning for this, you're ready to go. January 1st is the date that you're forming your entity, right? This is the first scenario. Or let's say you've had an existing entity for a few years now, and let's say 2023 is the first year you want to treat it as an S corporation. Then typically March 15th is your deadline. That is why you might hear people say file form 2553 by March 15th or within 75 days. But the IRS words the instruction as 2 months and 15 days because they want the instructions to also cover that second scenario where I said you formed your entity on February 15th. All right. If that's a little bit confusing, don't worry. We're going to touch on that here in a moment. But to give you an example, for an entity formed on February 15th, the 2-month period would end on April 14th, and then 15 days after that is April 29th. So you could file it by April 29th and still be in compliance, and your S Corp election would be considered timely filed. Again, if that's a little confusing, I understand the dates might be. Don't worry, the instructions on Form 2553 actually explain this, and there are a few scenarios to help you kind of walk through it, and I'll touch on it again here when I start showing you the actual screen, okay? Real quick on the instructions, if you go here in this section here, it says giving you examples like no prior tax year, there was a prior tax year, examples of like, when you are considered sort of making this election timely versus when it might be late, okay? And you can see there's relief for late elections a little bit further down here. All right, now let's get into the actual completion of the form. So in this example, I'm just saying, hey, we're gonna use a company called Sample LLC. As I mentioned earlier, this could also be for, Sample Corporation. This form is used for LLCs and corporations. So you're gonna put the name of the entity there, right? The full name as it's listed with the state that you formed the entity in. You're also gonna put in the address, right? So here I'm just made up this address, right? 123 Main Street, anywhere California, USA, 12345. I don't know if the IRS would reject it if you didn't put it here, but a lot of people actually miss putting the country even though it calls for it here. So I always put it when I complete these forms or assist my clients with this. The EIN, so this is the employer identification number. You want to make sure you complete that as well. Letter B is the first place where I see mistakes. You got to be careful here. There is only one answer here, okay? So you really shouldn't have to guess on this. The date the entity was formed with the state is the date that you're going to put here. In my example here, I'm saying the LLC was formed with the state of California on January 1st, 2022. This could easily be any other day of the year or even a previous year. So don't get confused by this. It's very simple. It's simply the date the entity was formed in the state that you formed it in, okay? Letter C here, state of incorporation. Technically, LLCs aren't really incorporated, but state of incorporation, that of course, again, is the state that you form this entity in. For the most part, that's going to be the state that you reside in because that's the state kind of where you're operating out of, okay? Let's scroll down a little bit. I guess I'll mention it like part 1, letter D, check the box if the entity, after applying for the EIN number here, changed its name or address, then check the respective box. That's telling the IRS, okay, hey, we need to update our records for this EIN and change the name or change the address that we have on file. So you'll just check the appropriate box. That might not apply to you. If you didn't move or you didn't change the business name, you're gonna leave that blank, all right? Okay, letter E. This is another area that you want to be careful with. Okay, when is the election to be effective? Is what the question is being asked here. If you form the entity in a prior year and want the election to become effective at the beginning of the current year, then you would enter a date of January 1st. In my example, 2023, right? So let's say you formed your entity on February 15th, 2023. And you are electing to have the entity taxed as an S corporation as early as possible. The date entered here would also be February 15th, 2023. You would not enter January 1st, 2023 because the entity didn't even exist on January 1st, 2023, okay? So just be mindful of the date that you put here. It's the date in which the you want the election to be effective, okay? It's going down a little bit further. Part 1, letter F, selected tax year is almost always a calendar year. You would probably know if you were choosing a non-calendar tax year in advance, okay? Part 1, letter H, it says here name and title. Don't forget the title. I often see new entrepreneurs just put their name here and they forget to put their title here. You should put the appropriate title, but even if you mess this up, I guess it's kind of okay. The IRS is not going to know, so they're not going to necessarily reject it, but they may reject it for not putting a title there. Phone number of who the IRS can reach out to if they need it to contact you. I've really never received a call from the IRS. Typically, you'll get a letter in the mail. So, but do put the phone number there. Okay. This section here, letter I, is going to be completely blank. This area is reserved for late S Corp elections. Like I said, there's another video that discusses that where I tell you about the language that you might want to put here. At the bottom of page 1, you're going to want to sign this, right? Be very careful here. As of the date of this recording, the IRS wants what's called a wet signature. You may not have heard that term before, but basically, they don't want an e-signature. Don't use DocuSign here. They want a good old-fashioned, ink, pen, and that's what you want to use to sign this document. Again, you want to make sure you put the title, and you're going to date this document too, right? The date that you signed it. Okay, that's the bottom of page 1. Let's move on to page 2, okay? So at the top of page 2, as well as on pages 3 and 4, you're going to always want to put the EIN, as well as the company name. I see this missed all the time. They forget to put the entity name and the EIN. IRS might let you slide on that, but it should be on all the pages, okay? Let's review these columns here, J through N, okay? So in my example, what I've done here is I'm saying there's one person. That person's name is John Doe. They also live at 123 Main Street. They're in California. And they're the only shareholder, okay? They're the only owner of this entity. So what you want to do is put your name, make sure you also put the address. You want to sign here. Again, this needs to be a wet signature. Do not use an electronic signature here. And you want to date it. I happen to be recording this, or I'm putting in the date of January 15th here, okay? Number of shares or percentage of ownership. Well, this is a little tricky. I mean, I tend to put percentage of ownership for LLCs. If it's a corporation, then you should know the amount of shares that your corporation had at the onset. So, if there was 1,000 shares issued when the entity was formed and there's only one owner, then John Doe would put, 1,000 here because he owns all of the shares of the company. Date acquired. This would be the date that the entity was, formed, right? So I put January 1st, 2023 here because that sort of coincides with the date that this entity was created. So something to consider here is, this is not common, but like, let's say there's a new shareholder, that came in after the fact. Well, their date acquired might not be the date the entity was formed, or I should say the date the entity is electing to be taxed as an S corporation. Okay, their date might be later. So, but most of the time it's this date here. Social Security number, obviously that's going to be John Doe's social security number. And the shareholder's tax year, a lot of people put a year here, but really they want just the month and the day. So, December 31st is going to be the shareholder's tax year end for every individual. If a business was here, then it could be different. But for every individual shareholder, it's going to be 12/31. Now, this is very important and applies to community property states only. Okay, so Google what a community property state is. There's, I don't remember, 7 or 8 or so. But many professionals, including myself, will miss this. And for sure, small business owners miss this if they're doing this on their own. If you're in a community property state, your spouse is supposed to sign this because they have community interest in your S corporation. So what you want to do is kind of follow what I've done here. So I'm saying Jane Doe, and I'm putting in parentheses, this is the consenting spouse who happens to live at the same address. They need to sign here as well. Again, a wet signature. Okay. They need to date this document. Over here, number of shares or percentage of ownership, you're just going to put 0% or not applicable. Okay. Dates acquired, once again, not applicable here. You're going to want to put their social, and I guess you can put their tax year as December 31st as well. Okay. Now, that's again for community property states only. If you're watching this and you're like, hey, Navi, I'm in a community property state. I didn't do that, and my S corp election got approved. Well, there is, it's slim, but there's a potential for it to be revoked in the future. But there is something called a ruling related to this, or a rule related to this, that can kind of get you around that if you made that mistake in the past. So don't sweat over it too much. If you've done it incorrectly and your S corp election was approved already, you can probably just leave it. You don't have to try to amend it, okay? But let me just say real quick that obviously if your spouse is an actual shareholder, then you would include them here just like you did yourself, right? So you wouldn't put consenting spouse, and you would put, if it was, 50% ownership or half of the shares, it might say 50% here, or 500 shares here and 500 shares here, because it was a total of 1,000 shares. And obviously you want to put a date that's acquired. All right. So again, real quick, I'll recap that. The recommended process really would be to list the consenting spouse, put their name, put their address, put their social as a shareholder here on page 2. And next to the name, you're going to want to put consenting spouse, and follow the instructions kind of as I gave you. Scrolling down now, page 3 is, again, you want to put the entity name and the EIN at the top of the page. Don't forget that. But page 3, part 2 is only completed if you elected a non-calendar tax year up above in part 1. And I noted that is very rare. Okay, so you're actually not going to complete part 2 of this, which is pretty much all of page 3. Page 4, which is part 3, applies to what's called qualified subchapter S trust. And if that is you, you probably don't need my help filling out this form, or at least you probably don't or shouldn't be doing this on your own, via watching a YouTube video like this. So if this is you, probably don't, get a professional to help you with this. All right. Part 4 down here, on the bottom of page 4, is for late S corp elections. And this video is covering, once again, I don't want to repeat myself too much, how to file your S corp timely, okay? How to make that election timely. Again, I covered in another video. So if that's you and we're trying to do this late, go check out that other video on how to file this form and complete this form. There's some special things you need to do when you're doing a late S corp election. Okay, cool. Let's transition to, now that you know how to complete the form, let's talk about some other things that you might need to know. And, as a matter of fact, something that might be important to know, or at least I think it's important that you know this, is that on my website, I actually do have some free resources that will help you form an entity. So if you go and just type in my name followed by CPA, navimuradcpa.com. This is my website, and there's a lot of resources on here, and some of them include companies that will help you form this entity, and a lot of them have reduced their pricing to almost be free. They will charge you to apply for an EIN number. Some of them even will do your S corporation paperwork for free or have a small charge related to doing your S Corp election. So you might want to check that out. But also too, if you click here, I do have a course that I created. You can check that out by clicking on that link. It's designed to help entrepreneurs save thousands of dollars in taxes. Plain and simple. My students pretty much learn how to do things properly. They're learning the tax strategies. They're learning how to use QuickBooks, what bookkeeping is, a little basics about accounting, basics about tax, and how to implement all those strategies within QuickBooks itself. So, if you check that, if you want, you can watch the preview. There's a preview video where I talk through all the contents. You can preview some of the lessons there as well on this page. If you just keep scrolling down, all right, you'll see the video there, okay? So let's go back to the things related to S Corp elections that are important that you know, okay? So I'm gonna answer some questions for you. Question might be like, okay, well, what could you expect to pay to have someone do this for you? Well, in my experience, CPAs may charge anywhere from $250 to $500 to complete this form for you. But I know that might sound like a lot, but really what they're doing is sort of having a consult with you to make sure an S Corp election is appropriate for your business, right? So you're really paying for their time and their expertise and giving you that guidance. So you're really paying for a consult there rather than the completion of the actual form. But I think it's a good investment if you're not sure if you should be an S corporation or not. Let's talk about how and where to send this form. So, you've learned kind of what it is and how to complete it. Okay, you're done completing it now. How should you send it and where should you send it to, okay? I always recommend sending either by fax, so you have a fax confirmation, or by certified mail so you can keep your delivery confirmation. Now, if you review the form instructions, they really don't mention the fax confirmation as an acceptable proof of filing. And if I can find it real quick, I'll show it to you here. If you scroll down far enough, it says here, there's a section on page 3 of the instructions, acceptance or non-acceptance of election. And you kind of see the options here of what the IRS will accept as proof, okay? So they don't really mention a fax confirmation. I was told that by an IRS representative once, but I never had to really test it to see if that's gonna be acceptable or not. So if you wanna be extra careful, send it via, United States Postal Service, USPS, either certified or registered mail, and keep track of your receipt. Personally, I've done this. I've sent it via USPS, and the mail was never delivered to the IRS. So don't assume the document arrived at its final destination. Check the tracking status, and if it got lost in the mail, send it again, okay? The instructions, like I said, list where to send the form depending on what state the entity was formed in, okay? This is listed in 2 places. It's on the first page of Form 2553. So I didn't show you that earlier. Let me scroll up and show you. If you get the very first page, it's telling you, hey, the form actually starts on the second page, but we want to clearly tell you, depending on the corporation's principal business office, which is in these states, then make sure you send it here, which is different from where you would send it on these different states, and also the fax number is different too. So make sure you get that properly. It's also the states and the addresses and the fax number. It's also on in the instructions as well. Okay. Let's talk about the actual S corporation acceptance letter. Okay. So when you send this out, this takes about 8 to 10 weeks to be processed, and for you to actually receive in the mail your S Corp acceptance letter. When you receive it, don't throw it away, okay? I've actually had a client tell me, oh yeah, I got the letter, I read it, and I tossed it. So what you want to do is try to keep the original, make a copy, that's always a good idea. And I always ask my clients to send me a copy as well, so I have it in my file. So it will serve as your proof in the event the IRS one day says, hey, we don't have a record on file for you that you elected this S Corp acceptance. It's on you to now prove it to us. as crazy as that may sound. What should you do in the event you don't receive the S Corp acceptance letter? There is a phone number especially dedicated to this, as well as a handful of other issues. It's called the Business and Specialty Tax Line. Okay, that phone number is, as of the time of this recording, you can find it here, 800-829-4933. Okay, their regular hours of operation are, as it says here, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. That's your local time. And in my experience, if you're going to call this number, call as early as you can in the morning, because if you don't, prepare to be on hold for quite some time and be ready with your personal information. You might need your name, address, name of the entity, social security number, things like this. All right. They won't tell you when you call this line, they won't tell you if you receive, they receive your form or are processing your election. They'll only be able to tell you if it was approved in their system. Okay, so those are the questions that I think you might have, or kind of completes the process of not just completing the form, but also some of those follow-up questions that you might have that the answer may not be in the instructions. Okay, before I wrap up, do me a favor, leave me a note in the comment section below. Let me know what you learned. Was this video helpful? What else do you want to understand better? Did I lose you while going somewhere with this? Please let me know. Give me your feedback. That's how I make better content for you and more content for you if you ask questions. In a moment here, 2 videos are going to pop up. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll link the video on how to make a late S Corp election and the video about the 4 reasons I said where you do not want to be taxed as an S corporation. So watch those, as they are likely very relevant to you if you've been watching this video. All right. So don't forget to like and subscribe and perhaps share with a fellow entrepreneur. And I'll see you in the course or perhaps in the next video.